With another school year now in the rearview mirror, it's a good time to take stock of the last year in Fort Wayne Community Schools. A report card of sorts, especially considering this recently published Indiana Youth Institute's 2026 Kids Count Data Book, a trusted database resource of child well-being across Indiana. And who better to navigate the macro issues facing our school children than Fort Wayne educator and superintendent of Fort Wayne Community Schools, Dr. Mark Daniel. Mark, welcome to the 260.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
There's probably nothing more critical and more that we invest in more than the well-being of our kids and our schools as a society, as a community, as a culture. How would you rate the last year for Fort Wayne Community Schools? Let's start with the big successes. What would you like to start with?
So, this is the third year that we've had what we call students who are peacemakers. That program continues to be embedded. It started at Southside High School.
That's an incredible program, by the way.
Great program. Is now spread to the other 4 high schools. We're looking at also how can we move it into middle schools. But again, if we didn't have the SAFER referendum, we wouldn't have the dollars to do this. But back to your point, dollars well spent. Here's why. As I look at the study, youth study, it is talking about what's happening in this region, specifically, what about the mental health issues across our community?
I want to talk about that too.
Yeah, across our community. Well, I think we've done tremendous work in that area. Yes, the peacemakers, which your students are leading students in self-regulation, but also spreading the wonderful advice and I'll just say, the attributes of Martin Luther King Jr., the 6 viable nonviolent
And for
actions.
our viewers who may not be familiar with the Peacekeepers, it is a program within the schools that you pioneered, right?
Yes.
You piloted to reduce conflict and anger and aggression within the school populace.
Which, if I look in Fort Wayne as itself, anything we can reduce, again, violence, acts of aggression, if we can start within our own community, i.e. our school, how do we spread that into the community? That's been amazing.
Yeah.
Now, if I look at the study, they're saying mental health continues to increase, mental health needs. So let's talk a little bit about that. So with that, we've also added, again, because of a federal grant, we have licensed therapists in every one of our schools, elementary through high school. Plus we have licensed therapists that are interning as they're trying to get their next degree or certification. Now, that has also been highly successful in my opinion. We've seen a reduction of negative behavior, but we're always concerned. We're really a microcosm of your community.
Of the community, yes.
And as such, if you want to address mental health, then address it in your schools. If you want to address violence, address it in your schools. That then spreads to the greater community. That's our thinking, that's our theory, and I'm seeing that happen. I'm very, very pleased.
It's interesting. I think that many viewers might harken back to when they were in school or when they were parents of school-age children, and say, I don't remember mental health being such a big component of what I was thinking about or dealing with. Is that a recent phenomenon? Is it always been there? We just have new words for it?
I would say it's always been there, but it's somewhat been under the radar. Those students would tend to leave, exit. Now, if I just look in Fort Wayne Community Schools, we're trying to address the problem, bring it to the surface, and let's address it. We know too, though, that mental health professionals, we're on a continuously downward trend of availability, and that's part of that report. How do we move that up? How do we have more mental health professionals? Again, I think we're part of the solution by providing this opportunity for mental health providers, licensed mental health providers. But we never had that. I'm a graduate of Northside 1979. That didn't exist in that time
It
period.
didn't exist.
But also, people don't realize the graduation rates of high schools at that time were in the upper 70s. Now we expect upper 80s, 90s. Why? Because kids could exit, drop out, get a job, probably at International Harvester or some manufacturing place, and they can make a livable wage. That doesn't exist today.
What other successes have you seen?
So I think
What are you proud of?
as I look at what we've done with what we call Schools of Success powered by JA3DE, there have been tremendous gains in that, in the fact that we have more and more businesses and organizations, such as yourself, universities, other nonprofits, but also corporations that have come into our buildings. This is high school, but they've mentored our students, they've coached our students, and we're seeing that materialize, the return on that investment, especially Northside's been the pilot. They went wall to wall 4 years ago. They're seniors graduating today. I was just at a breakfast for JA3DE. It's called Inspired to Hired. Hearing our students speak, they're another level of preparedness. So very, very proud of that. And I would like to say it's because we've been very intentional. We're intentional because we know that we have to prepare them. We call it the Monday after high school, but we do that through experiences.
What are some of the challenges that you're still facing that you wish you'd get a handle on?
So poverty is a challenge. Specifically in Fort Wayne Community Schools, if I look again at the report, it shows that we're continuing to have a divide between, I'll just say, those of the upper economic level versus those of the lower socioeconomic level. There are different problems associated with that.
Yeah, talk about how poverty comes into play during the school day at the schools.
If I look at poverty, going back to the JA3DE phenomenon and what we're doing in Schools of Success, poverty, students don't have the resources to have internships. Resources like what? Well, I have a car, how am I going to get to that particular business or organization to have that internship experience? So we've had to bring businesses inside our school. We've actually encouraged it. And so now we have 50 plus businesses that come in and 6 case challenges, freshmen and sophomores, but there's a challenge. So the challenge is, how do you work around that barrier? And we found a solution. I'm very, very proud of that. But that continues to be a barrier also, as far as what about nutrition? What about their
Food insecurity, continues to be something that
it's
affects
very real
children.
to our kids.
Yeah.
And I'm very, again, always I'm pretty much an optimist. I'm very pleased that the community has said, hey, how do we increase blessings in the backpack? Let's continue that not just during the school year, but let's also take that during the summer. But that is a very, very real thing. So when you do have a little one or a student who comes to school every day, and yes, they need that breakfast that we're offering. They need that lunch. And we offer that, we provide that. I would like to have it more nutritious, less processed food, and we're working on that. But that is to me, that's an issue we have.
Do schools find themselves, and you've had a long career in education, do schools find themselves now being more of a hub, than just the 3 R's?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We really are providing services that the whole community has provided at one time. Because we've just gone through nutrition.
Yeah.
We can talk about health.
Yeah.
We can talk about mental health.
The report talked about something called the Vulnerability Index. What is that exactly?
Well, what I see the Vulnerability Index being is a combination of several things. When a student is vulnerable, they don't have those resources. So what does that lead to? Well, if you break down some of the mental health issues, okay, that's depression. Is that depression more than 2 weeks? How are you going to deal with that child? Well, we have the resources, thank goodness, because of federal grants, but in a couple of years that expires. So that's a barrier.
Yeah.
But you also look at vulnerability in regards to what's also happening in regards to their nutrition, again, the food, availability of food. Absolutely, that makes them vulnerable. And I'm very concerned about that as well. But again, what we've discovered is this: we cannot do it solely by ourselves. There's no public institution, educational institution that can do it by themselves. It's going to take truly opening our doors and allowing people to embrace us. So again, more and more community partnerships. That to me has been a shift for us. We're no longer, well, that's the high school, very much, if you will, an isolated tower or a silo. We've had to break down that thinking. We need more and more volunteers in our buildings every day to help be models, mentors, to also, in regards even down to the second and third grade level, how do we help kids truly reach the reading level, third grade reading level, which is pivotal. And again, back to vulnerability. If they're not reading by third grade, by the end of third grade, they are going to be very vulnerable in regards to success in the future.
We just finished the school year. What are your teachers telling you?
It's hard work. It is really, really hard work. Our teachers, that's why we need more and more volunteers in our buildings, because our teachers can't do it by themselves. They've been doing that, and I'll give them all the praise in the world. But it is hard work. It's tiring work. And quite frankly, sometimes, do we have teacher efficacy? Do they really believe they're making a difference? I think we're moving in that direction as well. Very proud of that. Especially when you take a school like Levon Scott, which I'm going to give you a stat that I use quite often right now, because we had roughly 50% of our African American students passing iRead. That's that third grade iRead test. We had roughly 82% of our white students. That's a huge gap. Today, that was about 4 years ago. Today, that gap is gone. Our African American students are now about 81%. Our white students are about 89%. That's gone from a 30% gap down to 8%. That's phenomenal growth. But if you would have asked our teachers 4 years ago, was that going to happen? Was that truly reality? Could we really move that needle? I think our teachers are believing more and more that they are making a difference. That's a morale booster. At the same time, it is very hard work. It's tiring. And, I wish we could pay them what they should be paid.
The public has a vision of school. I think it's cemented, at a time when they went to school, and it's what has changed about education so much?
So, absolutely, everyone's had a school experience.
Yes.
So we all come through that. Because of that experience, we do have some, I have these expectations. This is the way they would do that, this, and what have you. It is much more complex than what we can possibly imagine. So the layperson may see, well, if they would do this, that would be so simple. Not as simple. First of all, we're being asked to do so much more.
Yeah.
Going back to the graduation rate in the 70s compared to the expectation is we need 95%. The expectation is you're going to have students ready for college. That wasn't the case.
Right.
Now it is the case. And we need to rise to that expectation. But first of all, we need to believe that our students can do that. And I think we're moving in that direction. There's the big difference. Also, our whole high school diploma has shifted in the state of Indiana. I think we are probably leading the country in this trend, i.e., you need students who have pathways in their background. Pathways meaning, hey, you're a human, you're very interested in health services. Well, what does that mean? Oh, we want you to have Project Lead the Way Biomed. We want you to take this, we call it our principles class, and then a concentrator A, concentrator B. You need that because you need it for graduation. And it's like, whoa, we have really focused.
Yeah.
Now, is that right or is that wrong? We can have that discussion, but I'll say intentionality is going to create hopefully a student more prepared for the Monday after graduation versus sort of a laissez-faire type attitude.
All right, you must come back because there's so much to talk about. Final question.
Yes.
What would you like people to understand about today's student?
All right. What I'd like them to think about, they are assets. They're assets. They're going to be the next workforce. And as such, we want to make them the best well-rounded student as possible. But we also have to make them ready for the Monday after graduation. We need our community to help us do that.
All right, we're all in.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. Mark Daniel is a Fort Wayne educator and the superintendent of Fort Wayne Community Schools. Thank you so much. Please
You're
come
welcome.
back.
All right.
Appreciate it.